we've heard a lot recently about the fact that maybe the virus did start in the lab. Let's talk about that. The fact that there is this lab, I think it's the only one in the world quite like it, in Wuhan, where it started. It would almost be a conspiracy theory to think it didn't start in a lab.
You would think.
Right? And that theory was demonized at first, that, oh, it can't, that, come on, that's conspiracy thinking, that it would started in the lab. But it certainly is a 50-50, would you say that?
Oh, it's far more likely than that. As a matter of fact,
Right.
I said, I think in June, that the chances that it came from the lab looked to me to be about 90%.
Okay.
So this was never a conspiracy theory. In fact, that term is simply used to make it go away. It's an obvious hypothesis that is in need of testing, and we are only now, a year in, getting to the point where we can discuss it out loud without being stigmatized.
Okay.
A big part of the problem, of course, is that we are so politicized, we are so polarized and partisan now as a country that if the wrong guy proposed this to begin with, and for half the country it was the wrong guy, then the rest of the country says, no way, no how, we're going to call that a conspiracy theory, and we're never going to revisit it. And the fact is that's not how science works. That is not science. You need to say, I've got a pattern, I'm going to make some observations, and I'm going to consider every possible explanation on the table. And did it leak from a lab? That was clearly from the beginning a possibility.
Okay, so let me ask you this. At first I was going to say, oh, when they make me get this, I want the mRNA because it's new. I feel like it's an improvement over the old ones. Then I heard you say, no, even though you're a little squirrely about it tonight, I heard you say you want the one where they have a little piece of the virus in it, the way they did it for many, many years. Then I heard about the lab. And I was like, wait, if they made that one in the lab, do I really want a little piece of that virus in me? Is it possible there's something in a lab-made virus that is different and would make a vaccine different than the ones we've had for decades, which were made from viruses that occurred in nature?
Well, this is a complex topic. The adenovirus...
That's why you're here.
Right. The adenovirus is one that you have history with, or at least viruses in that family. You are very unlikely to have any evolutionary history with beta coronaviruses, which are the ones that SARS-CoV-2 comes from. So just from the point of view of what unexpected might happen if we give you the adenovirus vaccine, it's much less likely to be dramatic than lipid nanoparticles, which is what the mRNA vaccines are packaged in. As far as the little fragment of DNA in question, or the fragment of RNA, they produce the same proteins. So the target is the same. The virus is wrapped, the SARS-CoV-2 virus is wrapped in spike proteins, and the idea is to give those spike proteins to the immune system so that it recognizes them immediately if you ever get infected. And from that point of view, the vaccines that are currently available are equivalent. They're all delivering...
So you're not worried if it was made in the lab that it would be different? That a vaccine would be different, made from that came from a lab instead of nature itself, which, I mean, the lab is taking nature itself, of course.
Yes.
So that doesn't concern you?
All of our best tricks we are borrowing from nature. And in
Right.
this case, we are just simply taking that spike protein and figuring out how to get it into your cells so that your immune system gets a chance to see it.
So let's assume that the Chinese were not trying to create a bioweapon. It's possible that they were. If they were, they did a hell of a job because they shut down the world. But let's assume they were just studying this for eleemosynary reasons. We want to have them, but it got out. Maybe like on a worker's, you know, it's like when the busboy doesn't wash his hands before he goes to the bathroom, and you know, then you get food poisoning. But for the whole world.
Right.
Right. That's what happened. Okay. So that got out. It raises the question, should we ever be studying viruses in labs this way if we're just going to create the problem that we're trying to?
Well, that battle was taking place before the COVID-19 epidemic. There were two factions. There was a faction that said we had no choice but to study these viruses and, in fact, to engage in what's called gain-of-function research, where we turbocharge the viruses and make them much more dangerous than they are in the condition we find them. And the argument was that we had to do that in order to know what they would be like in their dangerous form, and could perhaps prepare by generating a vaccine. And then there was another faction that said, actually, we're likely to create exactly the disaster we fear. And what was missing from this discussion was a proper evolutionary analysis. Now, the fact is, there are lots of viruses that can escape from nature and infect people, but in general, they don't have a second trick. That is to say, they can infect you, they can make you sick, maybe they can kill you, but they can't jump to the next person. And so what's really conspicuous about this virus is that it had both tricks from the get-go. It infects people and it jumps from one person to the next with no explanation.
And now it seems to be having a third trick, which is it's mutating, which of course is not new. Viruses are always mutating. That's why flu shots are very often so ineffective. Right. Because you're getting the vaccine that's why I never wanted a flu shot, for the one that was around last year. Sometimes they're as little as 10% effective. But okay, so this one is definitely mutating. We have a lot of them now.
Yep.
The South African one, the British one, they're all over the world now. I heard at the beginning of this that they usually get milder viruses as they mutate, because they want to survive. They don't want to kill anybody, then they got no host.
You might expect that a virus that did emerge from a lab that was doing gain-of-function research would precisely not do the thing that wild-type viruses would do, that it might exactly do what we seem to be seeing, get more virulent, get more pathogenic.
You think it's getting more virulent, the mutations?
If you think about it, the expectation amongst those who have been seriously investigating the question of whether this is a gain-of-function lab escape virus is that the virus would have been passed through either animals in the lab or tissues in the lab in order to use evolution to re-rig it. And that means that effectively tension was put on the virus, pulling in the direction of certain things. Some of those things were intentional, like infectivity of human cells, which may have given it extra capacities like this furin cleavage site that no other virus like this has, but SARS-CoV-2 does. So in any case, in an attempt to give it these extra capacities, lots of things will have been inflicted on the virus, including things that we don't think about. So many of the characteristics, the fact that this virus attacks so many different tissues in the body does not seem natural. The fact that it does not, at least at the beginning, did not seem to transmit outdoors nearly at all is very conspicuous. I mean, after all, most animals live outdoors. So a virus that seems to be adapted to indoor transmission is a bit conspicuous in this case. But I think Heather's point is, all right, you take the tension off of it, you let it go into the human population, it spreads out, we've now got many millions of individuals with infections, it's now going to move in the direction that makes the most sense for it rather than the most sense for the researchers. So yes, I think there's every possibility that what we are seeing is a response to this virus now being free to explore evolutionary space.
And the common theme is we need an evolutionary perspective on the research that's being done. It seems that there are certainly perverse incentives to, once you start doing research, to try to keep doing that research regardless of whether or not it's still good for humanity, right? And, excuse me, whether or not this virus emerged from a lab or not actually has implications for how it is likely to behave now that it's out in the world, and how, therefore, we should imagine how likely these things are going to be going forward.
So we should have been paying attention to the lab theory at the beginning, but we didn't because it was politicized, really is the moral there.